I'm living with my childhood friend. This day, I came home and saw him holding my freshly washed underwear, frowning and asking, "Why do you wear pink?" 01 Braving the summer heat and returning home, I opened the door to see my childhood friend, David Johnson, standing on the balcony, his 8-pack abs exposed, dressed incredibly cool, and holding the underwear I had just washed yesterday. My gaze followed his V-line abs down, landing on his shorts. Maybe it was just my imagination, but it seemed like this guy was deliberately straightening his back, making his already impressive assets even more obvious. My breath caught in my throat. David Johnson? He didn't care at all that he was being seen practically naked and smiled at me. "Want to take a shower first? I've prepared your clothes for you. I can do it myself." I snatched the clothes away, inadvertently glancing at his lean muscles, and my face flushed. I thought to myself that this cohabitation was simply unbearable. David Johnson and I were neighbors who grew up together. Maybe it was because we were too familiar with each other, but he was so intimate with me that he had almost no sense of boundaries. In short, he didn't treat me like a girl at all. He could hold my hand without a care, eat what I hadn't finished, share a milk tea with me, and even wash my underwear for me, things that only couples in love would do. But he just saw me as his best female friend. Admittedly, David Johnson is a strikingly handsome man with a great body. Although I don't know if he is good in bed, his equipment is indeed large, making him a good boyfriend in every aspect. Normally, being so close, I would have already made a move on such an excellent man. But when heaven creates beautiful things, it always leaves some regrets. Such a perfect man has a quirk. Because he witnessed his mother cheating and sleeping with other men when he was young, he hates all the girls who show him love and want to have physical relationships with him. All the girls who confessed to him were invariably blacklisted, deleted from his friends list, and never to see each other again. And I am the opposite sex who has been by his side the longest because he has always treated me like a brother and friend. Thinking of this, I suddenly regretted agreeing to his request to cohabitate. Being together every day, it's inevitable that I'll expose my secret. Once this secret is exposed, David and I will fall apart. Because I also like David Johnson. Hot water washed away the fatigue of the day. I sighed and recalled some past events. Back when we had just started college, David Johnson made the excuse that he was afraid others would bully me and would come to accompany me to class whenever he didn't have classes. He would take me to the dormitory for women every day. Over time, rumors naturally spread. Once, when we were eating together, his roommate couldn't help but ask him, "Are you two dating? Have you done anything yet after all this time?" I was stunned and hadn't had time to answer when I saw David Johnson's face darken, showing a look of disgust. "Don't put us in that disgusting relationship. Jane and I are just best friends." For a moment, all eyes were on me. Ignoring the many incredulous and surprised feelings, I calmly took a bite of my rice and thought, "What are you looking at? Haven't you ever seen a platonic friendship? Well, maybe you haven't." When he reached out to hold my hand for the nth time in the mall, I finally couldn't help but protest. "Don't you think this is inappropriate? Holding hands in the mall." I tried to make my voice sound serious. David Johnson, wearing shorts and a t-shirt in the same style but a different color from mine, asked innocently, "What's wrong with it? There are so many people, won't we get separated if we don't hold hands?" Damn it. What he said made so much sense that I couldn't refute it. He reached out and patted my head, signaling me to wait. "I'm going to buy some popcorn and Coke." I watched his departing back, feeling a little satisfied. If I could keep hiding it. "Emily Davis?" My train of thought was interrupted by a clear, mature female voice. It was Ashley Green, our former campus beauty. She was wearing a light-colored, fitted floral dress and high heels, looking like a pure white lily. I had met her a few times in college because of David Johnson. I didn't expect to run into her here. I said politely, "What a coincidence. I didn't expect to see you here." Ashley Green's red lips curved into a charming smile. "It's not a coincidence. I came here on purpose." She took out her phone and waved it at me. On it was David Johnson's messaging app Moments. David Johnson, watching a movie after a long time. He had posted a photo of our hands holding together, as well as the mall location. Ashley Greene's words were laced with sarcasm and a hint of bitterness. Emily Davis, I didn't expect you to be so shameless. Occupying the position of a friend while enjoying the treatment of a lover. I asked, so? What are you here for? Ashley Greene proudly raised her head. Who wouldn't want a good man like David Johnson? You may not know, but we've been in contact since graduation. He often talks to me about things girls like. It's easy for a woman to pursue a man. As long as I want to pursue him, he will like me. I looked at her with a hint of sympathy. David Johnson is indeed a good man that everyone wants, but he doesn't want to bend for anyone. I said, then good luck. Ashley Greene's beautiful face twisted for a moment. She said, do you know what everyone usually says? They say you're cheap, pretending to be an indifferent little white flower following David Johnson, but in reality, you don't even dare to say you like him. She approached me, her face full of malice. What do you think his reaction will be if he knows that his best friend also has that disgusting relationship with him? This is the betrayal of the closes. Person. I was speechless. She was right. That's why I never dared to let David Johnson know. I was afraid of being abandoned. Perhaps my silence pleased Ashley Greene. She leaned close to my ear and said arrogantly, too bad you won't have a chance. Jane? David Johnson's voice interrupted her. I looked up at him. The tall, handsome David Johnson stood out in the crowd. The top 2 buttons of his black, fitted shirt were always open. Even though he was holding a large bucket of popcorn at the moment, it didn't diminish his handsomeness at all. If only his expression weren't so gloomy, many girls would come up to flirt with him. He seemed a little surprised to see Ashley Greene. What a coincidence. Ashley Greene smiled sweetly at him. Yes, maybe it's fate. Me? Ha, that's not what you said just now. David Johnson frowned, reached out, and grabbed my wrist, pulling me to his side. He nodded indifferently at Ashley Greene. The movie is about to start. We're going in first. Ashley Greene's expression stiffened for a moment. The next second, she reached out and grabbed the corner of David Johnson's shirt, smiling with a hint of flattery. Wait. I have something to tell you. Ashley Greene turned to look at me. Can you leave for a moment? I was about to push away when David Johnson gently squeezed my wrist. I looked at him with some confusion. I saw him reach out, take out his phone, quickly scroll through his contacts, and when he found Ashley Greene's page, he deleted and blacklisted her without hesitation. Ashley Greene's face paled instantly. You. David Johnson looked up, his eyes a little cold. I thought everyone knew the result. Thank you for telling me what gifts girls like before. So he had been asking Ashley Greene what gifts to give me every time. No wonder he wasn't so clueless. Ashley Greene's lips were bloodless. She looked incredibly fragile. I lowered my eyes silently, thinking, yes, everyone knows the result, but they all hope they will be the exception. Unfortunately, no one is. I looked up, wanting to help David Johnson share some of the food on the tray, but I saw Ashley Greene suddenly look up, her expression vicious. What about Emily Davis? Emily Davis likes you more than anyone else. Ashley Greene's expression was very smug, like an audience member about to watch the climax of a movie. Her voice was drawn out. She exposed my thoughts and secrets to the public, laying them all out for David Johnson to see. Look, the woman closest to you also likes you. I lowered my eyes, giving up on any explanation. David Johnson's expression was momentarily stunned. His gaze fell on my face. I looked away in embarrassment, wanting to explain, but I found that I couldn't say anything at all. Ashley Greene looked even more smug. David Johnson took a step towards me. I looked up at his handsome face, so close to me. He reached out and put his arm around my waist. The gloomy expression on his face instantly disappeared, and he said with a grin, not only does she like me, but I also like Jane the most. Me? Ashley Greene? The atmosphere was a little awkward. I secretly glanced at David Johnson and found that he was feeling pleased with himself. Ashley Green's expression was even more broken than mine. She pointed at David Johnson with a trembling finger. But didn't you say you didn't want to? David Johnson looked like he couldn't be bothered to explain to her. How could someone like you understand Jane and me? We don't have that kind of superficial, lustful relationship. Ashley Green was shocked by his matter-of-factness and stared at the two of us in disbelief. I thought to myself, see, this is how it will end up in the end. This isn't the first time someone has provoked him in front of me, but David Johnson doesn't care, so I'm not flustered at all. He is adamant that we like each other, but it will never be the kind of love, and we will never sleep together. A clever woman like Ashley Green could naturally see this from his words. She went from shock to hysteria and finally stood silently across from us. All the provocations and harsh words just now seemed like a joke. I'm not her rival in love, and she won't be David Johnson's only one. The noble campus beauty became a clown on the stage, losing all her dignity for a man she could never get. David Johnson's patience had reached its limit. He put his arm around me with one hand and urged me to hurry up and get our tickets. As we brushed past Ashley Green, I heard the woman say in a low voice, "Emily Davis, you're so pathetic." I suddenly understood. So in their eyes, I'm just pathetic. There was a time when I was the object of their envy. They envied David Johnson's special treatment of me, envied that people came and went around David Johnson, but only I stood still, envied that I was always David Johnson's only one. But when they found out that David Johnson didn't have any feelings for me beyond friendship, they would turn to sympathy and disdain for me. In the words of one girl, at least I tried, Jane. Instead of being afraid of losing and never daring to take that step. Love is like a sponge, the longer it takes, the stronger the love. The love that was originally like flowing water could still be carefully hidden, but the love was too strong, and with a gentle poke, it would overflow all over the floor. I realized that I couldn't continue like this anymore. Ashley Green only took one look today and found out that I loved David Johnson. Wouldn't David Johnson himself find out if I waited any longer? My fingernails were embedded in my palm, which hurt a little. I told myself that the time for deceiving myself was over, Emily Davis. Because I had something on my mind, I kept spacing out while watching the movie. David Johnson teased me in a low voice several times, but I didn't react. On the way back, I tentatively asked, "Why didn't you explain when people misunderstood our relationship before?" David D. Johnson? I started trying to reason with David Johnson. You tell people that you don't want to be in a relationship, so that those girls will give up on you. But you say that on one hand, and the other hand. I thought about my wording and continued, "You're overly intimate with me and say that we like each other on the outside. This will make people misunderstand that I'm your girlfriend. All the things you said before about not wanting to be in a relationship are wasted. People who like you will always have a glimmer of hope. David Johnson, I don't care what those people think. Besides, knowing full well that you are already my girlfriend, they still harbor hope. People who do this prove that I was right to blacklist them." David Johnson said matter-of-factly. My heart sped up a few beats uncontrollably. David Johnson said the sentence "you are my girlfriend" seriously and attentively. His tone was so matter-of-fact, as if we had confirmed our relationship. I took a deep breath and said expressionlessly, "That's what you say, but this will affect me finding a boyfriend." David Johnson stopped in his tracks. "You want to find a boyfriend?" Because of my words, David Johnson completely became a clingy puppy. He started following me every step of the way, asking me pitifully if I had other puppies outside and if I was going to abandon him. He also kept telling me how terrible other men were and how many people were unreliable and just wanted to coax girls into bed. Not only that, but he was even more considerate to me than before. When I woke up in the morning, I found that he had already squeezed my toothpaste for me, and when I came home, he would take my handbag. Although David Johnson was very considerate and caring before, he would still reserve some space and keep his distance. Now he was so unreserved that I felt like we were a sweet newlywed couple. When he lowered his head to untie my shoelaces again, I finally couldn't help but reach out and stick my fingers into his soft hair, using a little force to hold his head in place. Enough. His movements stopped. He maintained a half-squatting position and looked up slightly following the force of my fingers. This was the first time I had looked at David Johnson from a downward angle. His nose was straight, and because his t-shirt was a little loose, I could see his angular collarbones and muscular chest. I took a deep breath to calm myself down. What exactly do you want to do? Take care of yourself. It must be because I wasn't good enough for you before that you want to raise other dogs. David Johnson said seriously. Me? Do you hear what dog words you're saying? David Johnson continued with a serious expression. Isn't it good like this now? My department/company has completely stabilized, and I can completely support you even if you don't go to work, or like now, I wash your clothes and cook for you when you come back from work. I can also take care of you if you're sick. When you get tired of going to work one day, just quit and we'll go on a trip together. I have a villa by the beach. When we get tired of it, we can settle down there, look at the sea together, and you can raise pets if you want. Why do you still want to find a boyfriend? I can do what he can do. His voice was low and magnetic, describing the life I had once fantasized about, but I couldn't let myself continue like this anymore. All these good things were based on the fact that he hadn't realized that I had developed desire for him. No good. I interrupted him coldly. My face had never been so serious before. I looked at the helpless David Johnson and said, I am also a person with desires. That kind of desire. David Johnson's expression was blank. I forced myself to calm down, let go of his hair, and take a step to the side. So don't do this anymore in the future. Pa. David Johnson's hand tightly gripped my wrist. His hand was wide and strong, as warm as a stove. I okayed at him in surprise, and for a moment, I felt jealousy burning in his eyes. But the next second, he turned back into the familiar person I knew and smiled at me. Why didn't you say so earlier, Jane? Me? David Johnson stood up. I was almost completely shrouded in his shadow, which made me unable to help but take a step back and lean against the closed security door. He took a step forward, and I seemed to be able to smell a faint mint scent on him. He lowered his head, our breaths almost intertwined. When I looked up, I could even see the faint blue stubble on his face. He smiled at me. I can too. I was surrounded by male hormones, feeling dizzy and not understanding what he meant by this sentence at all. He reached out and rubbed my waist. The tingling sensation made my legs a little weak. I pursed my lips and glared at him, retaliating by reaching out and pinching him. I heard David Johnson gasp in my ear. The thing in my hand was heavy and hot. His eyes became extremely dangerous. My excellent neurons reminded me of the impending crisis. I wanted to let go, but it was too late. That hot hand pressed down on my hand. Then my lips were brutally crushed. I will make you comfortable. This indulgent folly did not go to the end. I was afraid that once we crossed the line, our relationship would instantly collapse and we would never be able to turn back. After regaining my senses, I immediately pushed him away. His technique was surprisingly good. My face was flushed, my legs were weak, and my waist was sore, but once I thought about the original intention of this intimacy, I felt that my mind was extremely confused. I wanted to distance myself from David Johnson and find a balance again. Fortunately, I was very busy with work during this period, often working overtime all night and having a reversed schedule, which greatly reduced the opportunities for me and David Johnson to meet. I specifically applied for a team business trip and quickly packed my luggage while David Johnson was away, then set foot on the land of Maplewood. Coincidentally, the person in charge of this collaboration also had the last name Shin. President Shin was very young, looking no more than 26 or 27. He wore a pair of thin-rimmed gold glasses and a neatly pressed suit. His whole body revealed the information of an elite, successful person. Looking at his face, I always felt that he looked a bit familiar for some reason. He was kind to others and didn't have the airs of a big boss. This collaboration went very smoothly. The busy days passed quickly. Before I knew it, half a month had passed. As the project was nearing completion, President Shin suggested that everyone go to a karaoke bar to celebrate. The lights flickered, and the atmosphere was lively. I sang a few songs to show my support and then gave the microphone to someone else, casually finding a corner to sit down. Half an hour later, I finally couldn't help but take out my phone and look at the chat box with David Johnson. His profile picture was a big-eyed ragdoll cat. The cat's eyes were clear and full of innocence, even looking a little easy to bully. No matter how you looked at it, it didn't match David Johnson's aura. My fingers slowly slid and looked carefully. When are you coming back? Soon. Are you busy? Why did it take you so long to reply? Puppy aggrieved. Well, a little busy. I made your favorite honey-glazed pork ribs today and want to send them to you. Photo. Looks good. I'm working overtime. I'll talk later. Jane, why didn't you tell me in advance that you were going on a business trip? I can also arrange for myself to go on a business trip to Maplewood to take care of you. Puppy holding a rose, charming smile. Don't be silly, work hard. The further up I scrolled, the more I could compare how our chats were becoming less and less frequent, and the conversations were becoming more and more indifferent. My distancing plan seemed to be slowly taking effect. The latest message notification was empty, and the conversation with David Johnson stopped a day ago. It ended with me saying, I have a celebration party, I'm going to bed early. For a full 26 hours, David Johnson hadn't replied at all. I felt a little sour in my heart. Maybe this was for the best. At least he and I could go back to being friends. We could still go out for a meal together sometimes, and occasionally say a few words of greeting during the new year. It was better than breaking through this thin layer of paper and never seeing each other again. The sofa next to me sank slightly. A strange, cold, woody fragrance wafted over. I turned my head and looked to the side, and saw President Shin half leaning next to me, lightly pulling on his tie to reveal his fair collarbones. His gaze fell on my screen. Boyfriend? I put away my phone and replied, no. It's just unrequited love. I was too lazy to hide it in front of strangers. Oh. He gave a meaningful expression and looked at me with a smile. I thought Junior Sister had already achieved a positive result with David Johnson. Junior Sister? David Johnson? The appearance of this familiar name caught me off guard. My mind buzzed, and I looked at President Shin in shock. Seeing this, he smiled nonchalantly and reached out to take off his glasses. Don't you remember me? You participated in a debate competition in your sophomore year, and I happened to be your opponent. But at that time, I was close to graduating and only did a mediocre job as the third debater. After the gold-rimmed glasses were taken off, President Shin's whole aura changed. He looked more energetic like this. I recalled his words and finally found a sense of familiarity with this face. He turned out to be Tom Wilson, my senior from the previous class. Tom Wilson put his glasses back on and said, at that time, you were the goddess of the finance department. Many boys had a crush on you, but David Johnson was always CLI. Inging to you. Any boys who wanted to give you love letters or ask you out were blocked by him. Even I got a few glares just for wanting to say a word to you. Men know men best. The way he looked at me at the time didn't look like you were in unrequited love at all. His voice was not loud, but it was enough for me to hear clearly. When I started hearing about David Johnson's possessiveness towards me, I was a little bit delighted, but his last sentence made me suddenly sober. David Johnson doesn't need a girlfriend, and I'm now drawing a line between us and wanting to go back to being friends. I looked up at Tom Wilson and said, Senior Shin, this matter is a bit complicated. Confessing wasn't a difficult thing, and Tom Wilson was a very good listener. He never interrupted the speaker and would also agree and ask questions at the right time. Skipping David Johnson's family reasons, I simply explained the matter. After I finished speaking, I felt a little dry and picked up the water on the table to take a sip. It was a little sour. I thought it was just plain water, but I didn't expect it to be fruit wine. Tom Wilson's eyes were fixed on me. Seeing me frown and put down my cup, he suddenly said, in that case, does it mean? He was very close, and the rest of his words were almost spoken in my ear. I looked at him in surprise. Seeing his serious expression, I was sure that he wasn't joking. Tom Wilson interrupted me for the first time. You don't have to be in such a hurry to answer me. We still have time. I looked down at the wineglass on the table in a daze. My hair on the right side was being pulled slightly. Tom Wilson's hand was on the back of my booth, and he was gently twirling my hair at the moment. I frowned, feeling uncomfortable with this sudden intimacy, but before I could react, a figure quickly walked over. My hair was released. I looked in surprise at the person who suddenly appeared in front of me. It was David Johnson, who should have been in a city thousands of miles away. He grabbed Tom Wilson's wrist with a sullen face, his expression extremely gloomy. I was puzzled for a second and hurriedly got up. David Johnson? Why are you? The music in the karaoke bar stopped appropriately. Everyone's eyes were focused on us. One of my male colleagues, who was relatively familiar with me, stuttered and said, it's Sister Sue's boyfriend. Good heavens, at that moment, I saw an amazing light erupt in everyone's eyes. That was the natural curiosity of humans about gossip. David Johnson let go of Tom Wilson's hand and smiled apologetically at everyone. I'm here to take Jane back to rest. He was handsome, and even when he usually had a cold face, many people were attracted to him, let alone now that he was being gentle. Everyone was quiet for a while and then booed, saying they understood, and told him that I might be noisy tonight because I drank a little wine. Whether it was because of his smile or the kind booing of the crowd, I only felt my cheeks getting hotter and hotter. I couldn't stay here any longer. I grabbed David Johnson and quickly led him out of the booth. In the corner of my eye, I also noticed that he smiled provocatively at Tom Wilson, as if he was gloating that I was pulling him. His sudden appearance disrupted my entire rhythm. At this moment, I realized that saying goodbye was just a fantasy. There are two things that humans can never hide. One is a cough, and the other is the look in their eyes when they love someone. I decided to take the initiative, either win him over or never see each other again. The summer breeze was bleak, and I stared at him expressionlessly. David Johnson scratched his cheeks, his eyes flickering. You've been a little strange lately. I was worried about you, so I specifically asked your colleagues. Before I could speak, this guy had already confessed everything in a few words. Yes, the one who betrayed me was the male colleague who said David Johnson was my boyfriend at the karaoke bar. Good heavens, I exclaimed, good heavens. David Johnson usually looks like a cool, handsome guy, but he got so familiar with my colleagues without me knowing. After just a few probes, the other party told him everything. I didn't speak, and David Johnson continued to admit his mistake. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to mess things up, but you said you had a celebration party today. At the celebration party, you might get drunk by someone with ulterior motives. You're so pretty, those bad men will have ulterior motives. That's how it's written in the novels. I'm afraid you'll be deceived by a dog man. Heh, this straight man reads these kinds of romance novels and randomly substitutes himself into them. I'm impressed. I said seriously, this is reality. This kind of thing won't happen in reality. And I'm very careful not to drink things randomly. Cool fingers gently touched my face. David Johnson's handsome face was magnified in front of me a little. He was very close, and I could even clearly see his long eyelashes and straight nose. My cheeks turned redder and redder against my will. He said, a little hot, are you drunk? I reached out and patted my face, belatedly realizing that my face did feel very hot. It should have been the glass of fruit wine I had at the end to moisten my throat. I didn't expect it to have such a strong after effect. I simply sent a message to Tom Wilson to apologize. He replied to me immediately. After hesitating for a while, I quickly sent a few messages and then put my phone in my bag with some guilt. David Johnson looked at me with bright eyes. I coughed lightly. Let's go back to rest. I have something to tell you. The bed in the hotel was huge. David Johnson said he was afraid I'd get drunk and pass out in the bathroom, so he insisted on waiting in my room until I finished showering. When I came out, He put down his phone and looked at me. I tugged self-consciously at the collar of my bathrobe and asked, "What do you think of Charles Brown?" David Johnson, slick, two-faced, greedy, and lecherous. Me, what? Is this some kind of adjective association game? He can come up with a whole string of negative impressions after just meeting him once? I couldn't be bothered with the unreasonable man. I grabbed a towel and sat across from David Johnson, drying my hair, and said bluntly, "He wants to pursue me, and I want to see what it's like with him." David Johnson's voice stopped abruptly. I glanced at him, surprised. When he pursed his lips and didn't smile, he looked a little fierce. Noticing my probing gaze, the corners of his mouth twitched, trying to form a smile but failing again. "Emily Davis, you've only known each other for 2 weeks. Isn't that a little fast? You should at least get to know him better before." David Johnson frowned. "Besides, he doesn't seem like a good guy. Ordering such strong drinks for you, wearing a suit and shirt with the collar open, lacking in male virtue." I almost laughed out loud at his words. The light in the booth was so dim, how could David Johnson observe so carefully? My eyes fell on the unbuttoned buttons of David Johnson's ever-present shirt, and I thought, "You don't seem very virtuous yourself. It's just a try. We can always break up if it doesn't work out." He paused, and the room fell into a long silence. Just as I was about to kick him out, David Johnson suddenly said, "Can't I be the one? If Emily Davis just wants a girlfriend, can't I be it?" My heart raced. If he had said these words 2 weeks ago, I probably would have agreed without hesitation. But after Ashley Green's thing, I suddenly realized what I wanted. I didn't want David Johnson's compromise under pressure. That wasn't love at all, and it was too fragile. "David Johnson, why do you suddenly want to be my boyfriend?" I didn't wait for David Johnson to answer before kicking him out of the room. I lay on the bed, picked up my phone, and opened my conversation with Charles Brown, replying, "Okay, let's try it your way." He replied quickly. I breathed a sigh of relief and slowly drifted off to sleep under the influence of the alcohol. David Johnson didn't send me any messages all night, and I didn't see him when I woke up the next day. Because of David Johnson, I was distracted at work all day. My right eyelid kept twitching like crazy. It's said that a twitching left eyelid means wealth, and a twitching right eyelid. I closed my eyes, gently patted my right eyelid, and continued, "A twitching right eyelid just means I didn't get enough sleep." The last stubbornness of a believer in metaphysics. Always only believe in metaphysics that benefits you. All ill omens can be explained by science. When I got off work, Charles Brown and I went downstairs together. At this moment, the little receptionist suddenly ran over, her face flushed, and said, "Miss Sue, your boyfriend is here to wait for you to have dinner." Me, what? Who? My boyfriend? How could I have gained a boyfriend from my business trip to Maplewood? My eyes followed the direction of her finger, and I saw David Johnson standing outside in a black, fitted suit, holding a large bouquet of red roses. Charles Brown, who was standing next to me, asked, "Do you want to talk to him?" I shook my head. "He's just acting on impulse." Because I wanted to leave, because I wanted to step out of his comfort zone and escape his control, that's why he panicked and wanted to keep me at all costs. Charles Brown hesitated but ultimately left with me, gentlemanly opening the car door for me. After I got in, David Johnson, still holding the roses, suddenly squeezed in. I frowned, about to speak, when David Johnson looked up at Charles Brown with a righteous expression and said, "Mr. Shin doesn't mind, does he?" Charles Brown's lips twitched slightly. He couldn't make a scene at the entrance of the department/company, so he silently closed the door and went to the front seat. My eyes fell on my colleagues in the distance, who were watching the show. I realized that things were deviating from my planned course. David Johnson was acting too naturally. Everyone who didn't know the truth thought he was my boyfriend. Charles Brown, who was driving in the front, asked, "Emily Davis, what do you want for lunch?" "Japanese food." David Johnson immediately refused. "Her stomach isn't good. She can't have Japanese food for lunch." "Then, Cantonese food it is. Corn chowder is nourishing." She's allergic to sweet potato. My lips twitched as I listened to them order and reject food, one after the other. At first, they had reasons, but later, it was just pure arguing. In the end, Charles Brown chose a buffet restaurant, which had hot pot, barbecue, and seafood, cutting off any chance of being contradicted. The three of us sat in a booth, Charles Brown and David Johnson on one side, and I and the roses on the other. The three of us and the flowers looked at each other silently. The waiter passed by for the fifth time and finally couldn't help but ask, "Sir, madam, our dining time is 2 hours." David Johnson finally moved his long legs away from the table and said, "Let Emily Davis eat first." I breathed a sigh of relief, finally not having to worry about them ending up on the news for fighting. David Johnson silently cooked food, grilled meat, and peeled shrimp for me. Looking at his skilled movements, I felt like everything was back to the way it used to be. At that time, I hadn't fallen for him yet and only saw it as taking care of a friend. Later, after I fell in love with him, I felt that this behavior was too biased. He knew that I only dipped steamed shrimp in vinegar, so he specially took a vinegar dish, peeled the shrimp, dipped them in vinegar, and placed them on my clean plate. I tasted one. The shrimp meat was firm, fresh, and sweet. Looking at the mountain of shrimp meat piled up in front of me, I said, "That's enough. You at some yourself." Only then did David Johnson start eating. Charles Brown's eyes kept wandering between us. Seeing this, he couldn't help but ask, "Mr. Shin." He paused. This form of address did sound a bit strange to him. David Johnson said, "Just call me by my name." "All right." Charles Brown cut into the tender steak with his knife and said, "I heard Emily Davis say that you two aren't boyfriend and girlfriend." David Johnson reached out to add a suitable drink for me. "That's right. I'm currently pursuing her. You see, I'm putting in the effort." Charles Brown. Me. David Johnson was considerate and attentive to me throughout the meal. Several times, Charles Brown tried to help, but David Johnson always beat him to it. After the meal, Charles Brown drove us back to the hotel. Before leaving, David Johnson called out to Charles Brown for some reason. I watched the two men talking not far away. Neither of them was the type to show their emotions, so I couldn't get much information from their expressions. I looked at the two of them. David Johnson's attitude was too familiar and impolite. I knew him well. Although he was cold to outsiders, this casual attitude didn't seem like how he would treat an ordinary senior from college. David Johnson, Charles Brown, is it just a coincidence that they both have the last name Shin? The bright roses were placed aside. I sat on the bed and questioned David Johnson, who was sitting opposite me. "Are you hiding something from me?" David Johnson sat up straight. "I definitely won't hide anything if Emily Davis asks." "Do you and Charles Brown know each other from a long time ago?" "I'm not talking about the time in college." "Yes, he's my cousin." I thought carefully for a moment before realizing why Charles Brown felt familiar. The lower half of his face was somewhat similar to David Johnson's, but he usually wore glasses, which changed the shape of his face, so I didn't notice it for a while. And that night, when he took off his glasses and mentioned things from college, I didn't think of him as a relative at all. I narrowed my eyes slightly and stared at David Johnson's face. An absurd thought slowly emerged. "Do you know that I like you?" The room was silent for a few seconds. He replied, "Yes." At this moment, I felt very ridiculous. That's right, David Johnson is an extremely intelligent man. You can tell from how easily he got into a prestigious Ivy League university equivalent in the country and how he successfully took over his own department/company and made it bigger and stronger after graduating for only a few years. I always thought he was the type who was quick-witted about things but slow to understand emotions. But I overlooked the fact that every time someone tried to show him affection secretly, or when there were signs of a relationship developing, he could always quickly detect it and cut off the other person's thoughts without mercy. Even Ashley Green, whom we hadn't seen in years and weren't very familiar with, could tell that I liked him. How could David Johnson not know? But he had been pretending not to know all along, watching me carefully maintain this relationship all by myself. Why didn't you say so earlier? David Johnson fidgeted with the fabric beneath him. At first, I didn't know how to bring it up. By the time I figured it out, I had already missed the best opportunity. You started trying to hide your feelings from me. So I thought it was good this way. We liked each other and were always together. I sneered, scumbag. David Johnson knelt beside my feet, reached out, and grabbed my ankle. I raised my foot to kick him, but he held it tightly. He knelt, looking up at me. I'm sorry for making you so sad. Ashley Green's words woke me up. I can't be an irresponsible person. It just so happened that your partner for the business trip to Maplewood was Charles Brown. So I asked him to test the waters and wanted to take this opportunity to come clean with you. Looking at the submissive David Johnson, I suddenly reached out and lifted his chin. You let him pursue me? David Johnson's expression twisted for a moment. He indignantly said, No. That guy took it upon himself. I pinched his chin and moved closer to him. David Johnson, I haven't forgiven you yet. If you don't behave, I can break up with you at any time. He showed a surprised expression and nodded repeatedly. If he had a tail, it would probably be wagging like crazy right now. The hand holding my ankle tightened slightly, and I slipped and lay back on the bed. He leaned over, his entire body covering me. The kiss came so suddenly and passionately that my lower lip felt numb. I couldn't help but reach out and grab his short hair, wanting to pull him away, but it only resulted in more intense plundering. The warm-colored light from the small night light in the corner made David Johnson's angular face look much gentler. My heart raced, and I stared blankly at him as he reached under the pillow. The rustling sound of a plastic bag came, and I closed my eyes with some embarrassment, hooking his lean waist. I didn't want to dwell on the previous events. Although I was at a disadvantage in what had happened before, there was nothing fair about love to begin with. Now that I had finally caught the person I loved, why should I fuss over the past and cause unpleasantness? I believed that David Johnson would be a good lover. That night was crazy and satisfying. I was extremely content and obediently leaned against David Johnson, letting him help me clean up. After everything was settled, I rested my chin on the side of his neck and took out my phone to send a message to Charles Brown. The vibration of the messaging app made David Johnson stir. Who is it? Charles Brown. I took a day off with him. Shall we continue tomorrow morning? The hand holding my waist suddenly tightened, and a hoarse, low male voice sounded in my ear. How about we start in? Oh. I put down my phone. The lit screen showed my conversation with Charles Brown. 2 days ago, Charles Brown, maybe you should provoke him a little, like pretending to find a boyfriend. I can play that role. Me, okay, let's try it your way. 2:30 me, thank you, Mr. Shin. I want to take a day off tomorrow. Cat begging Charles Brown, okay, congrats, sister-in-law, on getting what you wanted. The phone was thrown aside. I rubbed against David Johnson's firm chest. A skilled hunter often appears in the guise of prey, luring others into their trap to get what they want.